Hello, everybody. This is International Master Sam Shankland, and today I would like to conclude the series on the best 10 best moves ever played with the number one move. It's been a while since I recorded the last one. I recorded some other stuff in between, but I think this one I really had to take my time on, really analyze deeply. And before I get started, I should point out this game was the final game in the match between Kasparov and Karpov, in the one where the greatest chess master there ever was uh, claimed the world championship title for the first time, which he would not relinquish for 20 years to come. Clearly the most impressive chess feat ever. So in this, he was found himself playing the black pieces against Karpov in the final game, and all he needed was a draw in order to become the next world champion. And true to his style, he did not play an opening like the Petrov. He went straight into the Najdorf, did not play scared, and eventually the positions here was reached. And this is sort of a pretty standard classical Shevenigan type of position. And at this point, Karpov started to get aggressive with the move rook to d3. His idea is to swing the rook over to h3 and try to generate an attack. Now, I know if it were me, I would probably play something like bishop g7, rook h3, and knight f8, and try to hold tight and, make sure and just try not to get checkmated. And I think this is the wrong strategy. Kasparov really showed that even in the highest circumstances, when even a draw is okay, he's willing to fight. And the game continued. Knight b4, rook h3, bishop g7. He played knight b4 first, so that he has some pressure on the c2 pawn, and so that the rook no longer attacks d6. So after bishop g7, Karpov came out with bishop e3, getting ready to put the bishop on a better post, and trying to generate some attack, maybe pressuring the b6 pawn, looking at the d4 square. And now Kasparov came up with one of the best ideas I've seen. This isn't the great move itself, but it's preparing it. He played the move rook to e7, which seems a bit odd at first because it doesn't look like it does much, but it lends defense along the second rank, which I think is very important. Karpov played king g1, preemptively getting the king off this long diagonal, which looks somewhat poisonous. And then Kasparov plays rook c to e8. And to the untrained eye, it looks like Kasparov just doubled his rooks on a closed file for absolutely no reason at all. And strategically speaking, it makes little to no sense. But when we see what happens shortly after, it was basically mind-boggling. So Karpov played the natural move rook to d1. He's thinking, okay, black's put his rook on e7. That means his d6 pawn will be easier to attack because the bishop can't defend. And now Kasparov struck with the move f5, opening up the position and basically completely changing the character of the battle that was going to happen. So while this move doesn't have any amazing tactical effects just yet, I think it's positionally speaking and practically speaking the greatest move ever played, because it really opens the position up. It shows that he really has courage. He's not going to just let Karpov slowly build an attack, even when a draw is an acceptable result. He's putting himself at risk of losing when he's opening this position up, and and tactically speaking, as we soon find out, the initiative the black develops becomes completely overwhelming. White has to do something relatively soon. If unhindered, let's say white plays a move like king back to h1, black will play d takes e4, and let's say knight takes e4, d5, knight c3, knight back to c3, rook f7, and white's coming under serious pressure. His rook on h3 looks very stupidly placed now because it doesn't really have a way of getting back into the action, and there's a lot of pressure on white's position, particularly the kingside pawns, while all of his pieces look a little bit stupid. So one idea would be to play bishop d4 to try to incur the trade of these dark square bishops. But here, Kasparov noted he was planning e5, bishop back to e3. Now, it might seem strange to play bishop d4 to e3 for white, but he wants to open up files, and this also helps him control the d5 square better. But as it turns out, keeping the tension up more with rook f7, black has a big advantage because white doesn't really have an effective way of stopping the opening of the center when his rook on h3 feels offside and his king feels quite vulnerable. So at this point, really, the best move is g takes f6. And now Kasparov fights back with another strong move. Knight takes f6, exclam. He's not worried about the b6 pawn. He's starting to generate his play. If bishop takes f6, I think black certainly has some activity, but I don't think it's as strong as knight takes f6 because white still has sort of a free hand to build up his position. For example, say a move like queen to d2, threatening the d6 pawn, and if d5, white can even try, let's say, e5, bishop g7, knight d4. And white still has plenty of potential to build up his position. So, I think this would not be the best choice. And especially against someone like Karpov, who's very good at these sort of slower build-up games. But after knight takes f6, first thing to point out is if bishop takes b6, will be met by knight to g4. The queen doesn't have any squares to protect the bishop on b6, so white has to take the queen, and now white takes the queen, and now black takes on f2. If white takes back after rook takes c7, black's temporarily down a pawn, but my feeling is he should hold this endgame without too much difficulty because the c2 pawn is a goner, and his bishop pair is solid. So something like rook takes d6, knight takes c2, and if e5, let's say bishop takes g2, followed by rook to b8, and black will be able to trade off the pawns and draw the game to become world champion. So he's really using the fact that white needs more to also justify this great move. For example, also after bishop takes d6 is a possibility, but I believe after knight takes d1, he noted that he felt black should hold this position. So one possible line might be bishop takes e7. So bishop takes e7, knight takes c3, b takes c3, knight takes c2. Sorry, yeah, takes. Let's put this on the board. And his feeling was white's currently up a pawn, but black's activity should be enough to compensate it. It's hard to find a good square for the bishop. For example, bishop c5 looks like a natural square because it's sort of thinking of going to d4, but black sort of has a strong respite in knight to e1, the idea of poking this bishop on g2 and hitting the bishop on e4. So after this, if white plays bishop h1 after bishop c6, I think that the a4 pawn looks to be a goner because a5 looks basically suicidal in view of something like bishop a. Well, maybe not suicidal, but let's say bishop a4 and e5 takes, and black has very active position, and his pawns are much better. He's already threatening moves like rook to c8 to pick off some pawns. And Kasparov felt that he should draw this position, although objectively speaking, this was probably Karpov's best chance to retain his title. In the game, Karpov played rook to g3 to keep the knight out of g4. So Kasparov, again, has a chance to play move knight d7 and to protect b6. And he has a solid position here. This would have been a reasonable try, but he felt the energy flowing through the position, and he played rook to f7. Attack with the idea of attacking the pawn on f4. Karpov grabs the pawn, and Kasparov retreats. So he's sacrificed the pawn. The position is now unbalanced, and there is plenty of chances for Karpov to win the game now. So he comes back to e3. And now knight h5. Rook g4, knight back to f6. Of course, if Karpov wants to repeat moves, Kasparov is more than happy to do it. But Karpov decides not to here. And now Kasparov really starts the ball rolling with g5. So he's starting to open lines up. If white moves the rook away to h3, knight to g4, followed by knight takes e3, and taking the pawn on f4 will be a big advantage for black. For example, queen e2 takes, rook takes f4, the bishop will show up on e5, and all of black's pieces are very active compared to the white passive ones. Black has a clear advantage. So white has to accept this second pawn sacrifice. And now the position really starts to get out of hand. Knight takes e3, and knight takes c2. So black won a pawn back, but white still remains up a pawn, and black's initiative is roaring along. So Kasparov finds another strong move. There's many ideas. Sorry, queen b6. There's many ideas that can be played here. Bishop e5, for example, looks very strong, putting the bishop on a good square and protecting the attacked d6 pawn. But Kasparov found an even better one. Plays bishop a8, strong move. Now, white would love to try to trade queens and end up with a pawn up in the endgame. Unfortunately, if he trades queens here, he's starting to feel the weakness of the knight on b3. Note how Kasparov sacrificed material and is using the entire board to justify his play. All this coming with the pressure of playing for the world championship with not much time on his clock. And he's using the entire board to hold everything. And in this case, I think he has a good position. So white played rook takes d6, thinking, okay, if black trades queens now, white's up 2 pawns, and black doesn't have any tricks on the b file. But I think Karpov may have missed a little tactic here, which Kasparov saw. So I'll give you a second to try to find it. Okay, rook to b7. So note how every single one of black's moves since f5 has been a very aggressive try in a position which looks like it would be sensible to try to just hold and not really go crazy. But in this case, I think Kasparov's intuition was exactly right. He has to play actively. And if you think his moves after f5 were where he took back with the knight, sacrificing a pawn, then he offered the pawn again with rook f7, then he's playing moves like g5 to open up more lines. And so now he found himself in what seems to be probably a winning position. So Karpov plays queen takes a6, rook takes b3. Kasparov now is up a piece, but white has 3 pawns for it, and black's king is lacking defenders. So if white can start generating some play against the king, black is going to have to start getting worried. So he plays rook takes e6. Now, most people would be very nervous because it looks like white has a lot of pieces that can quickly come into the attack, and black doesn't really have many defenders. For example, if black plays a move like rook takes e6, which, okay, is a huge mistake, but maybe somebody would play in time pressure. After queen takes e6 check, already I think black may be losing. After something like king h8, queen f5, strong move, threatening h7. Note that if g6, black has a little trick, queen b6 check, to exchange the queens. But I think after queen f5, the position is probably losing for black. So that would be a real shame. And Kasparov correctly plays rook takes b2. He's just trying to create his counterplay, realizing that white's king is not exactly the epitome of hunky-dory as well. So this is move 38. It's getting very tense at this point. And now Karpov plays queen c4. So he's got some evil threats hidden. Of course, he's threatening rook takes e8 checkmate. And Kasparov plays king h8. And then Karpov hits him with e5, opening up more lines and more possibilities. So Kasparov had very little time at this point to try to find the last move before time control. So there are plenty of ways to win in this position, but there's also plenty of ways to lose. For example, a natural move, bishop takes g2. This looks very strong because if white takes back, there will be some kind of knight e3 check, disaster striking. And the question is, did e5 really do anything for white's attack? Well, yeah, it did, because after rook takes h7, which is an unbelievable move here, white's winning because he can bring his queen to the h4 square. King takes h7, g6 check. If king g8, rook takes e8 is mate, because it has a double attack on the king. So after g6, black has to go to h6 or h8. If he goes to h6, queen h4 is directly checkmate. If he goes to h8, queen h4 check, queen h7 check, and now another strong move, rook f6 check. Of course, bishop takes is met by mate. So king e7, check, here, check, and now in order to avoid mate in this position, the queen must be sacrificed. And while it looks at first like black starts to get some counterplay, really all it takes is one move for white to play queen c7 to give checkmate, and black does not have enough time to generate anything serious. For example, rook e1 check, king takes g2. He's got a discovery with the knight, but he can't really do anything with it. So knight e3 check, king f3, no checks. Or knight d4 check, king g3, rook e3 check. Or sorry, not king g3, because then knight f5 would be bad. But king h3, check, king g4. And now we're starting to run short on checks. Here, check, here. And white carefully avoids all the trapped squares. And, or wait, sorry, here, if he plays to d5, then knight f5 check wins. So hang on, let me go back for a second. If rook e1 check, king takes, knight d4 check. Maybe it's actually, I'm sorry, that's the problem, right? It's better to play king f2 here, which is kind of a strange move. But the point is, black, if he can't move the knight now because his rook hangs on e1. And if rook f1 check, king g3, and the checks are going to run out. So, for example, rook f3 check, king h4, rook h3, king g5. And the game is over. So that would be very embarrassing if this kind of innocent looking move, e5, met by bishop takes g2, would be a loser for black. But with just seconds to make the final move, Kasparov found the most accurate queen a7 check. Now the king has to move. And after he takes on g2 with check this time, white doesn't have time to take h7. Knight d4 check. Next move is knight takes e6. And white does not have anywhere near enough for the sacrificed material. So at this point, Karpov resigned, and Kasparov became the next world champion and would go on to become the greatest chess player who ever lived. So going back, this is now 42, on move 42. Kasparov really, I think, decided the fate of the game all the way back when he played f5 on move 25. He had correctly assessed that it's important to make the strange-looking moves rook e7, rook e8 to prepare for it. And then here, breaking with f5, and notice how every single move he's being aggressive. Once his initiative gets going, he doesn't let it up. He doesn't care about this b6 pawn. He thinks, okay, now he plays another aggressive move. He could play back to b7, but no, he decides to sacrifice a pawn. And okay, he has to move his queen. That's basically the one time he played a not aggressive move. And then this sort of knight maneuver followed by g5, opening up his king even more, but still blasting the position open and trying to use his better coordinated pieces. And then generating this huge attack. Every single move is aggressive. One beforehand, they were just maneuvering around. But when he opened the position up with f5, from then on, it's one famous grandmaster, I forget who, once said, to give Kasparov the initiative is like taking cyanide. So, basically, once Kasparov got the initiative, he never let up, and soon he ended up becoming the world champion because of this beautifully played game. He kind of overcame his long match with Karpov. He'd played a 48-game match before this, which ended up being undecided. And then in this 24-game match, this final game where he only needed to draw, he ended up going crazy, opening the position up, and then finally, that was it. He became the world champion in such a fashion after this forcing sequence. And what I think was really the most beautiful about this was after f5, the moves weren't really forced, but his initiative just kept on building, and no matter what Karpov did, it was never quiet down. And I think that's what separates Kasparov from the rest of us weaker beings, because he has this feel for the initiative, and I think that certainly showed through in this game. Or sorry, not knight e3 check, by the way, knight d4. That was important. So that was the end of my 10 best moves ever series. I would like to apologize to all the great players who have made great moves that I didn't put into this series. And until the next thing comes out, this is Sam Shankland signing off.